course of the last season, we've had the opportunity to hear directly from cybersecurity professionals operating at every level, from analysts, researchers, leaders, and decision makers who are shaping the future of cybersecurity industry. Cybersecurity isn't just about tools, certifications, technologies, or even technical knowledge. It's about how you think, how you adapt, and how you make decisions in environments where the stakes are constantly changing. So whether you're just getting started, looking to level up, or already operating in the field, this episode is designed to help you take everything that we've learned from the last season and turn it into something that you can actually use. And to help us do that is the founder and CEO of TopCyberPro at TopCyberPro.com, Jim West, and the author of Easy RMF, Michelle Coldenberg. Jim, Michelle, welcome to the show. How are you guys doing today?
Doing great.
That's
Awesome. Thank
awesome,
you for
man.
having
Yeah, you are absolutely welcome. So I know that, man, you guys are like really busy. I know you've been working on a lot of things over the last year. We've had some truly amazing episodes during season five. Can you believe it? Season five, man.
Yeah, I mean, it goes by so fast. Every hour, usually we record for right under an hour, but all of my guests, when we hit the stop on the record button, they always like, wow, that just went by really, really fast. And it really does. Time
Yeah,
flies.
yeah, I love it. But looking back over season five, was there anything that really kind of surprised you the most about to where cybersecurity is headed? Was there anything that really kind of surprised you a little bit?
I mean, not so much in surprises, but I think the insights that I get from different people that are at the forefront of their part of the industry, right? Just getting that
Hmm.
perspective because there's what you think you know, and then when you actually hear it from someone that's in the trenches or working that front line, it does, bring a little bit of, I guess, it brings you right front and center to the reality of what they're working with every day. So even though you might have read about
Hmm.
it, heard about it on social media or in the news, or you part of your studies for a certification, when you actually see someone that's working like cloud security and they're advancing cloud security or they're advancing the latest in emerging
Hmm.
technology, you really get, that right on the front line perspective. And I think that's probably been the most eye-opening thing is getting at those perspectives.
Yeah, I love it, man. You've had some truly amazing guests, but if you had to summarize season five in one sentence, what would that one sentence be?
Um, I think for a lot of folks, everything changes. The one constant that you can count on is change, right? And with change, you have to be agile. And so the big term right now
Mhm.
is like crypto agility in regards to like preparing for a quantum future, crypto agility. But I'd say the word agility happens to anything that you're attacking on, whether it's cyber threat intelligence, incident response, adapting a security plan to the ever-changing threat landscape. I think the key word is being agile, being the ability to make moves quickly. And so, because sometimes you'll put a lot of investment of time and money into something, but you don't want to get that sunk cost fallacy where you're all in on
Mhm.
something and it might not be the right direction or path. So, having the ability to kind of gut check yourself and say, this is not the right direction, halt the train and then adjust course. And having that ability to be agile, I think has become more important
Mhm.
than ever. And I think that's the constant thing I hear from multiple people in different facets of cyber.
Yeah, I love that. Was there any like themes that kept coming up? I know that you interviewed a lot of different people across a lot of different fields and ideologies within cybersecurity, but did you notice any like recurring themes that kept coming up?
It all comes to people, man. I tell you, people, people is what does operations and do the work in every business and organization. And I think what a lot of companies, we kind of forget the human aspect with the advancements in AI
Mhm.
and other technologies that we're trying to, people are concerned about workforce reductions. And we do hear about a lot of tech layoffs. In fact, recently, Oracle just laid off 30,000
Mhm.
plus employees
Wow.
for their investments in AI. But I think the long-term goal
Mhm.
is that investing in your people, investing into training and education never goes out of style because, people are
Mhm.
the one that moves the mountains. Even though, we're looking at AI and technology to help us do that. Still, I think that when we had, certain things in the past with call centers where they moved operations overseas, most Western countries wanted to have a voice that was familiar to them without an accent. So there was a little bit of resistance to that. And I think that we're going to see that with AI, that people are going to know quickly that they're talking with an AI. and they're going to want a human interaction. They're going to want to be talking to the person that can make actions and decisions. And so I think
Hmm.
people is still the constant that we still have to learn to keep them ever trained and educated. And I think that a lot of
Hmm.
those programs get lost in the sauce, if you will, of big stakeholders making those big decisions that sometimes aren't always considering the people. I know we got to
Yeah.
consider stocks and the bottom line, but to
Hmm.
move those stock prices usually require lots of good people doing the good work every day. So yeah.
Hmm. People connecting with people, and I truly believe that that's where it's at. I know Jim, both you and Michelle are absolutely amazing people. You're coaching, teaching, training, and mentoring. You're leading people around the world, and I know that both of you have written a couple of books. I think it'd be a great opportunity to kind of mention those books. I know Michelle, you have an amazing book called Easy RMF. If you want to show that real quickly. And so let's kind of talk about that. Like what was going through, like what's the thought process of putting thoughts and ideas within a book that could really train people within the world as emerging technologies happen?
So, just quick glance at the cover. Easy
Hmm.
RMF. It's the first published work that I've had so far. I've collaborated on quite a few, but this is the first one where I've been the leading author. The reason
Hmm.
why we created it is because you were talking about where sometimes seasoned professionals get it right and where they get it wrong. And a lot of the
Hmm.
times they get it wrong in the translation of a highly technical or very specialized field and having to communicate that to the
Hmm.
key stakeholders, to the people who hold the purse strings, to those who are making these executive decisions. They might
Yeah.
be the expert in their industry, but they're not able to frame it in the larger picture so that an
Hmm.
executive can say, okay, I know this quick summary. I get it now. This would be the best path. And so that's a lot of the disconnect that
Hmm.
you see in any field is from
Yeah.
this specialized expertise and then translating it into something that's actionable quickly, um,
Hmm.
and then being able to make those decisions quickly. And so we
Yeah.
did Easy RMF because a lot of it has again, a very technical aspect to it, with
Hmm.
the NIST framework and translating that into people, something that everyday people can use to secure
Hmm.
their businesses, to prepare for things that are coming down the line, and to stay up to date whenever it's a really challenging obstacle for small to medium businesses to keep updating and to keep changing and to
Hmm.
keep adapting whenever they were used to doing things that are no longer the most secure practices or no
Hmm.
longer what the industry best is because it continues to change so rapidly.
I'll actually
Yeah.
augment a little bit about her focus on the
Mhm.
book. The small to medium business sector largely gets left out of the bigger discussions in technology and in cybersecurity because obviously all the emphasis goes to Fortune 500 companies, companies that have $1 million plus, cybersecurity budgets that can afford, big tools and things that are very expensive to employ and the O&M support to maintain those tools. Whereas if you have a sole proprietor, like a mom and pop shop, to a medium-sized business with like less than 50 employees, they're still trying to grow. They're really, every dollar
Mhm.
has to be very strategically planned for and budgeted. Budgets are super razor thin. Not to say it's not the same in Fortune
Mhm.
500s, but they're working with a much bigger budget, period. But for small to medium
Mhm.
businesses, it becomes crucial that they can't just look at, all of the SP 800 documents on the NIST website and it's just an ocean of information they're going to get easily drowned or lost in. Whereas the
Mhm.
success of Easy RMF is saying, hey, there's 100 something plus controls, but here's the ones that matter the most as a small to medium
Mhm.
business. And it even gives you like, one, two, and three controls in each process group to say, if you just do this first one, this is the most bang for your buck. Again, be
Mhm.
mindful of tight budgets. And then if you could do number two, number three, great. Then move on to the next process group. But as you go through this book, it guides you through the most important controls for your business to secure your business.
Mhm.
And this is where I'm one of the contributors on the book. So in full disclosure, I actually
Mhm.
contributed the what I love to say is the low cost to no cost recommended solutions that are usually based on open
Mhm.
source and publicly available tools because not every business can afford hundreds of thousands of dollars in licensing costs for different tools. So whether it's a
Mhm.
CM event monitoring tool, asset management tool, etc., the open source, low cost and no cost tools to me are was one of the biggest things I love contributing to that book, so that businesses can start to look into these tools where they don't have to pay a lot of money up front to get secure.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's one of the interesting things is that I know that oftentimes training tends backseat sometimes, invest employees, investing within your business. And so there's been moments over time where it's kind of happened too late, and that's really not the moment that you want to be able to invest or your company or your knowledge, your skills, experience. But during your over the last season and within the knowledge, skills, and experience that you have, do you feel that there's any gaps that are out there? Is there anything that anybody's missing?
I tell you, the one thing I think they're missing is cybersecurity training, as it has been known and existed for a decade plus, is dead because people are just
Hmm.
brute forcing, clicking through just to get to the certificate or to check the box so that HR can say
Yeah.
that everybody's been trained. But the effectiveness, to me, it's about the retention rate. How much do people remember about the training other than it was boring, not really applicable to what they do in their day-to-day job? And so one of the things I've created recently that I didn't intend to talk about, but it's a good question, is
Yeah.
insecurity is my latest presentation that I've developed
Mhm.
to promote to conferences and events worldwide. And insecurity, that's the question and problem that I've answered. And I've presented a cybersecurity training where in less than 1 hour, I give more than you would get in a 40-hour training class of cybersecurity knowledge. And it's relatable because I use things like people's wallets,
Mhm.
talking about their home security, their house, their car, things that they see and use every day. Everybody goes to a home, whether they live in an apartment, townhouse, a house, or wherever they
Mhm.
live, and their car, how did they transport themselves to work every day. And once I start using these things that they see every day, they know really well, and I correlate it into cybersecurity principles and practices, it changes things for them. They leave that 1 hour being more security minded than when they came into the session. And to me,
Mhm.
relevance is the key thing, making things super relevant and at the same time making it fun. And like the new term people talk about, edutainment, right? Education, entertainment.
Mhm.
You have to make people have to make it relevant, right? Not just scare them and use fear tactics, but make it relevant,
Mhm.
but at the same time make it very fun and easy to remember so that when they leave, they're talking about it still, sharing it with their colleagues like, hey,
Mhm.
you need to take out your wallet. And I want them to do the same thing that I do in the session with them to their colleagues, to their family members, to have those same little sessions that I do with like the wallet, talking about the house and so forth, and have those discussions, have those what I call scenarios they can talk through and have an interesting conversation about because that's what makes it
Mhm.
memorable. So again, the two words for training to really hit home with people is relevancy and trying to make it some form of edutainment, make it educational and entertaining.
Yeah. So I have kind of a two-part question here. Speaking of edutainment, speaking of some of the guests that you've had over the last season, and there's been some truly phenomenal guests. Has there been any one particular guest that kind of stood out, and why?
A lot of different guests. In fact, that's a good question. If you don't mind, I'm going to share my screen, Terry, because I'd like to kind of just,
Yeah.
as I'm talking about them, kind of pull up the channel here and share
Hmm.
kind of what. So we started the first episode with a great guest. So we had Lynn No here, who is the world's first transhuman. And to clarify what a transhuman is, he is the merging of machine and man, where he has, I believe, 11 technology implants. And he has a documentary out called I Am Machine. So I recommend anyone that's listening right now, take a pause, do a Google search. And if you could find that on YouTube or anywhere online, or find a conference or film festival, because I think they're still screening at different film festivals. But it's an interesting documentary. I got to see it at the Hacker Halted event in 2025, and I got to sit down and have some great conversations with Lynn at that during that event. So Lynn's a phenomenal guy, kind of at the forefront of biohacking, if you will. But the emergence, the convergence of man and machine, he's leading that forefront, and it was a really interesting conversation. But if I look across all the 25 guests, the one that really comes to mind every time I think about the past season was Tammy Harper. She is one of the top experts in the world in threat intelligence and security research. And talking to her, listening to her story, how she has to maintain kind of an unconventional sleep schedule to be awake during certain times at these different hacking groups that are online because of time zones around the world, and how she has to maintain multiple personalities and personas within these different hacker
Hmm.
groups to stay plugged into that information. It made her sound like a cybersecurity James Bond or secret agent, if you will. And that was really, really interesting to talk to someone that's leading the forefront of cyber threat intelligence. And was really interesting because it sounds like something you would see as in a film script, right? So she was
Hmm.
definitely another standout character. As I scroll through here to some of my other guests, Here's one right here, Franzel Flood. So I met him in Wiesbaden, in Germany, at the USARAF G6 Cyber Summit. He works for the government, and he's one of those what I call rising cyber rock stars. Brilliant gentleman, brilliant young mind, and I love that he's constantly learning. If I recommend anything to cyber professionals today is to not just get your one cert, get your job, and then forget about keeping the mind
Mhm.
sharp. You got to read. You got to be what I call plugged in, reading and keeping yourself sharp on the newest technologies. And he's just such an impressive young man. So I said, hey, I got to interview you because again, I want to capture this moment in time, like a time capsule of where you are today, so that years later, when we look back on it, it's like, hey, I interviewed him when he was getting started as a rising cyber rock star. But going across the rest of the season, I mean, I've had experts from different, cloud security to zero trust to quantum to AI, and a lot of great conversations, discussions. But I would say, I closed out really strong because I did have the Deputy Assistant Director for the FBI Cyber Division talk about Operation Winter Shield. And it's interesting to talk to these big agencies. When we think of the FBI, CIA, all these big three-letter agencies, we like to think of them being very cloak and dagger and very just kind of keep to themselves secretive. But this is where the FBI Cyber Division is trying to help the public, trying to help commercial businesses with giving some guidance from the FBI, because they investigate and they do a lot of things in the cyber world, right? And they're taking all of those lessons learned and then putting it out there as these are 10 different things that you could do, and it's all listed on their website under Operation Winter Shield. But that was a really good, memorable conversation because it shows where our government is trying to give back not just to federal and defense spaces, but actually trying to help the public. And I really love that conversation with Ted Hemmon with the FBI. So those are just a couple, but all my guests offer unique insights and perspectives. I love all the guests that have been on the Top Cyber
Mhm.
Pro podcast. But like I said, those are the ones that immediately stand out to me. And like I said, I just have it on the screen here that I'm sharing, just kind of say that thank you to all my guests. They've all been were just wonderful. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing my
Mhm.
screen.
Yeah.
All right.
I love that, man. Thank you so much for sharing. And, all of your guests are phenomenal, but is there anything that was unexpected? Is there anything that like, oh my goodness, like there's something that just I didn't expect that or I wouldn't expect you to answer a certain way? Was there anything that kind of caught you off guard?
Um, No, I would say not caught me off guard, but the interesting conversations usually come from the guests that you don't usually plan to have on a cybersecurity focus or cyber education
Mm.
focus podcast. So David
Yeah.
Stonehook, he's a gentleman that has done a few little documentaries on cyber technology meets media. And the discussion
Mhm.
really wasn't so much cybersecurity, but just talking about how you can leverage this technology in media. And it was more of a content creation discussion of being a creator. The term he used that I really like was being an outlier. Don't be afraid to be
Mm.
bold, to be, decisive, to be different. And I really like that aspect of conversation. And so I know, in the next season, in season six, I've actually added a few more guests in that vein of being adjacent to
Mhm.
cybersecurity because I think there's a lot of value in having those discussions on things that are not directly in the cyber world or lane, but very close to it or have an intersection into it.
Mhm. Throughout all the conversations that you had, do you feel that there's anything that the professionals are getting right, or do you feel that there's anything that they're just a little off on, or they're missing the mark?
I think what I said a little earlier about the education aspect. A lot of people they do their studies, they
Oh
get their
yeah.
certs, they get the resume, they get their job, and then they get
Mm.
complacent. I think if
Hmm.
you are complacent, if you have in the past, let's say 3 to 5 years, if you have not gotten a cert in the past 3 to 5 years, you may want to look around and see what's out there. Keep the tools sharp because let's say you're working in governance risk compliance, GRC, and it's a largely
Hmm.
paper generated position or largely generative role, meaning you got to generate policy, you got to generate documentation. Well, guess what is out there right now that can generate content and documentation? That's ChatGPT, right? Generative
Hmm.
AI is going to replace or wipe out a lot of roles within the GRC community. So what I would advise people is like if you take anything away from like however you feel about AI is irrelevant. You could talk to 30,000 people right now with Oracle that just lost their jobs. They got an email at 6 a.m. in the morning telling them they no longer had a job. But did all
Hmm.
30,000 people anticipate that possibly happening and start upskilling themselves so that they can be more attractive in the job market? Because right now, for the past few years, there's a lot of complaints on like LinkedIn and other platforms talking about how, well, we see all these openings, but no one's getting interviews, no one's getting job offers. So there's a big rift between what may be available and what actually is to,
Mm,
and even if you come to a real job, there's so many qualified candidates in the job pool. How do you differentiate yourself from everybody else that's in the job market, right? So 30,000 people
mm,
from Oracle, I'm not saying that all 30,000 are IT cyber workers, but sniffing the number are, and now they're in the job market and the job pool too. So again, not being caught flat-footed, always upskilling, always studying and training. The term I love to use is be a perpetual student. So if you're a cyber professional, you feel comfortable and complacent today, you're just one morning waking up at 6 a.m. to an email from your company saying you no longer have a job. And that's a very
mm,
scary reality for a lot of folks that
yeah.
they may have to face. So again, I think always being a perpetual student is the key thing for any professional out there.
Mhm. Now you talk about AI,
Oh,
and
Michelle,
there's a l-
you had something to
So
add?
I did want to bring up that you do have a episode from this season with Charles Roth, talking about the
Ah,
recruiting red and green flags within IT and cybersecurity. And like you said, since it's an ever-changing field, having a point of contact in who is actively recruiting and actively in that
mm,
space is helpful, especially for people who are looking for jobs right now.
yeah, that
mm.
was again another
That
great episode where it wasn't all about cybersecurity. Even though he recruits for cybersecurity roles, he has a little bit of knowledge in cybersecurity and actually engages with his conferences in I think it's South Africa, and got a big presence with the different like B-sides, etc. groups. With the people engagement. But like I said, it was good to have that insight from a recruiter, and I'm looking forward to probably getting
mhm,
another HR recruiter that recruits for IT cyber jobs to again get more
yeah.
perspectives in that space.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And it's been said that your net worth is your network, or I'm paraphrasing here just a little bit, but I know that the both of you travel quite a bit. You go to events, you go do a lot of things. I want to hear from Michelle first. Michelle, what is the importance of building your network, building your community? Like know, like, and trust. Like I know, like, and trust both of you. How important is that, especially within like the tight knit community within cybersecurity? How important is that, and what recommendations do you have for people trying to build their network within the community?
So I would say within the community, first, it's based on being worth your salt, as Jim would say, meaning that you
Mhm,
know not only your basics, but you know your field and you know your
mhm,
specialty, in and out, forwards and backwards. You're not just
mhm,
skipping through it. You're not just coding the surface. You have the depth that you need to be effective in your field, but then also the breadth to understand how that intersects with other
mhm,
domains within cybersecurity. People forget
mhm,
that it is a small world at the end of the day. And while you might have met someone 10, 15 years ago, careers are always changing. The field is always changing.
mhm,
And so they might have been a previous service member who might have been stationed somewhere that you're familiar with. And now
mhm,
they've gone to serve in a government role. And then from that government role, they've changed into nonprofits. And so it is
mhm,
not, people are not static and the field is not static. And so maintaining those connections and maintaining a form of support where you can touch base. Not only is it like a quick temp check of, hey, how are you doing? How is your area doing? But it's also building this, I call it the grapevine. If you keep your grapevine healthy, you're able to go and then reap the fruits later of that effort
mhm.
and that level of care and connection that you build with people.
Yeah, I love that. I've known both of you for many years, and both of you have been a great resource for me. I know I can reach out to either one of you whenever I have a question or a concern, or I'm just trying to figure something out. Jim, what are your thoughts?
The human element, as I mentioned earlier, with like in regards to like AI and the job market, you mentioned also, teamwork makes the dream work, and it's not always what you know, who you know too. So building those connections because someone that you meet at a conference that months later could be the person that gets your foot in the door with another business if you find
Mhm.
yourself in the job market, right? So building your human
Yeah.
network is tremendous, right? And you get that through face-to-face interactions and conferences and events are great ways to do that, right? It's also a great way of bouncing ideas. Like, let's say you had an idea and it really didn't gain traction at work, but if you say, hey, I've been dealing with this problem in my office, XYZ, and then someone comes and says, hey, but what about GHI here? And it might just give you that one way
Mhm.
to quickly say, hey, I like that. I'm going to go back to my office and maybe pitch it this way instead. It gives you a good sounding board, like a random stranger. How is anyone going to be more honest than someone that has zero stake or, zero authority in what you're dealing with to
Mhm.
say, hey, what about this? And and it doesn't always work that way, but when it does, it's magic. When you come across that person, it gives you a
Yeah.
slight tilted perspective, and then it changes how you approach things. Can be everything, right? So just in one interaction can be life changing. And that's one of my favorite questions when I
Mhm.
think about my guests. I always ask them about what are some of the mentors, colleagues, coworkers, managers, directors that have had a positive impact in your career? And I follow that right after
Mhm.
their day one story. But when I ask that question, it's kind of like that Oscars moment. I know that they're on the spot. They're not going to name everybody they could think of, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't have all the time in the world. But what it does is it really starts to make them think about those big impact moments in their career. So if someone's
Mhm.
had, 10 years, 15, 20, 30 years of a career, they're going to go back to those big moments that, hey, this manager believed in me, gave me the ability to think
Yeah.
on my own, to think outside the box, to move some mountains early on in my career. That was everything because it gave them the confidence to
Mhm.
keep doing things like that. And I love hearing these stories as they recollect those moments with those managers or coworkers, etc., that said, hey, if it wasn't for this person, I probably wouldn't be where I am today. And I always think, wow,
Mhm.
how just one person can make such a difference. And you hear that with other people too, when they
Yeah.
talk about a school teacher, like this teacher believed in me, wouldn't give up on me, etc. It's very similar to those kind of inspirational stories that, just to hear within a few minutes that, hey, this person, without their
Mhm.
motivation, their mentorship or guidance, I wouldn't be here today. And I love that because, again, that can also
Mhm.
happen from a conference, an event, because this is where a lot of people are coming together that care about security, that actually care about what they're doing because they wouldn't take the
Mhm.
time and money to leave the office if they didn't care. And so that's what I really like
Yeah.
about, when you mentioned the traveling and I think of the conferences, events, and people. But it always comes back down to
Mhm.
people, right? Because the people are the ones that make the decisions, people are the ones that do the work. And yeah, about people.
Yeah, I love that. And there's a lot of hype around different things like AI, zero trust, emerging technologies that are going to take over, the world and this, that, and the other. But is there anything that organizations should be preparing for right now that they're just not looking at, they're just not seeing because, the hype of things is just more relevant than the things that maybe they're missing?
Back when robotics was changing the automotive industry, where they were put, they're like where they're replacing the people with robots and machinery. Well, they actually created different kinds of jobs, right? It then just because a robot might have replaced putting a hood on a car, or glass, handling glass on building the car, it still required people to, operate and manage the machines and to service those machines when they stop working, right? Or to monitor that the performance was up to par. So it does create different kinds of jobs. And so when people talk about like AI has been a real big topic of discussion, and it has resulted in a lot of jobs being cut. That we can't ignore anymore. I don't care where you are on the AI debate, whether you're between, oh, AI is not going to get rid of all our jobs to AI is going to take all our jobs. Anywhere in between that, it doesn't matter. People are losing their jobs. But here's the thing I was going to say, there are other jobs being created because we've seen a couple companies put out AI certs, and almost every vendor that I've seen on the internet in the past 2 years have now have AI as a component of their products or services. So, if like Cisco, for example, one of the top networking providers in the world, they have AI agents or things that are enabled in their platforms and so forth, and they have free training on it. So if you're a network engineer, a network analyst, network administrator, it should behoove you to right now look up Cisco's free training on AI. And I think they got about 60 plus hours of free training and take that free training to upskill just for your own job's sake, right? And that goes for everything else that's out there. Everything has some AI component with typically free training. And there are a couple of entities that do have AI certifications. I still think we need a little bit more time to see who's going to outright win that AI of a credentialed certification race. But there are some vendors out there, EC Council being one of them. ISACA has some AI focused certs. So we're going to see who kind of becomes the creme de la creme, if you will. The cream will rise to the top. And I think we still need about another
Mhm.
2, maybe 3 years before we see that.
Yeah, I want to turn it back over to Michelle. Michelle, I know that you've worked really hard in the last like 2 to 3 years here to break into the cybersecurity industry, to get your certs, to do some things. And man, like I know both you and Jim are proud of the work that you've put in, and I've seen it, from a distance, but it's like it's inspiring, it's empowering to see somebody that just can go in, get the knowledge, get the skills, get the certs, and then you just break into the industry. But having worked the way that you have, like, what do you think is keeping people from breaking into the industry? Like, what's holding people back?
I would say the number one thing would be fear or the lack of belief in themselves.
Mm,
And I speak from that
hmm
personally. My
Yeah.
background was technical adjacent in that it had always been trying to keep, I was in communications, as you know, communications does tie very closely with technology as technology continues
Mhm.
to evolve. And so I didn't have the original belief in myself that I was smart enough or that I was disciplined enough to get into a technical role or to get into
Mhm.
something that required such accuracy at the same time
Yeah.
because can't it I had to always be right in the previous roles, but now I have to be
Mhm.
educated and correct in these current
Mhm.
roles. And
Mhm.
so it's the fear of mistakes, it's the fear of not being good enough, and it's the fear of not being smart enough to keep up and to keep pace with it. That was, I would say, it was not my belief in myself that got me started. It was definitely a mentor who believed in me a whole lot more than I believed in myself. And they saw everything that I had overcome in the past and said, this is nothing compared to the obstacles you faced in the past. You can do
Mhm.
this. And it
Yeah.
was, again, that one person and that one individual who said, you can do this. I can see from your past that you've done so much already. Why not take this next step? And their
Mhm.
belief is what helped me establish that confidence to say, okay, I will give it a shot because I respect your level of intelligence and your experience in this field that I will give this my honest go and see where it goes.
I love that. That's kind of that reminds me of leadership. It's the leader that sees the potential that other people do not currently see within themselves, and then giving them the opportunity to learn, to grow, to, go on what they believe within themselves. So I love that. Jim, anything else that you want to add to that?
You know what I'd add to that? A lot of times when I have discussions with people that are either at a crossroads in their career or have uncertainty in their chosen career path or uncertain about, making the transition to cyber, a lot of uncertainty and uncertainty ties into fear, self-doubt, imposter syndrome. There's a lot of different words that are in that discussion bubble, if you will. But usually what I
Yeah.
tell people when they're curious about IT cyber, I'll ask them, "Hey, can you read?" Well, yeah, I can read. Can you comprehend? And they're like, yeah, of course I can comprehend. Like, then it's that
Mhm.
easy. If you could read and comprehend, you could read policies, you could read, technical documents are only technical because they're talking about technology, right? That's it. You could take someone that's in football and I could teach them cyber threat intelligence from just football plays, right? You can correlate anything to anything else. Everything is translatable to a degree. Even if you're someone that only worked with people, like years ago, I had someone that was a retired Army nurse trying to get into cybersecurity, and there was a discussion where people were trying to give her the guidance to go get a service desk, help desk level job and work your way up. It's like that old talk, start in the mailroom and
Mhm.
work your way up to the boardroom. I was like, no, no, no. This woman's got 25, 30 years experience. She's a retired Army nurse. She has dealt with people at their worst in crisis. So she's management material because managers have to deal sometimes with people in crisis, people at their worst, people having the worst day. Those skills are translatable. She just has to find the right role. And I said, unfortunately, when people see that you're an army nurse, they're going to think you should be in the healthcare industry, but you have to find a way to find the right role. I said,
Mhm.
target a deputy level role or a vice level role where you're in there doing all of the work because that's what deputies do. They do all the work. You make the
Mhm.
director or the program manager or whoever above you look good all the time because you're the one that's hard at work. And then eventually, when they get promoted up into the C-suite, you are now cleared the way for yourself to step into their seat because you've earned the seat. And so that's the advice I'd given
Mhm.
this person. But for most people, I always say, can you read and comprehend, which everybody can, then you could do cyber, right? And we need every experience, every perspective coming in because, I was having a conversation today with some folks that talked about their SOC team and how, like, hey, the manager hates when everybody leaves, right? I said, actually, if you're a true manager, true leader, you want your team to grow. One,
Yep.
everything they learn while they're in the seat benefits you because if they learn about
Yep.
latest threats and hacks and attacks, they're more powerful, they're more knowledgeable. So you grow your team's
Mhm.
strength. But you got to expect that with that growth, they're going to outgrow their role and they're going to move on to something else. You should be very supportive of that because that shows that you are supporting your team. As a service leader, you want your folks to grow because their growth benefits you immediately. But ultimately, long term, they're going to grow out past position. You want to be helpful and help them get to the next position. I've even wrote letters of recommendation for former team members because I gladly want to see them grow. Because if you don't want to see them grow, then you're selfish because you just want to keep your little
Mhm.
existence as long as possible. No, you should be living on the edge of wanting them to grow and move on and out. That's also an opportunity to get a fresh perspective, to get another person
Yep.
in at that point in their career and build them up as well to be very, capable, to grow their capacity, to grow their knowledge, and to mentor and grow them too. It's an opportunity. And again, with opportunity, they can come and say, hey, just like when I said, when you go to a conference, you try to pitch a solution and you get shut down at work. You go to a conference, you're sharing that idea with somebody like, what about GHI? That's your moment for your GHI moment is the new guy coming in the team going, hey, I see that we're using this tool, but we're not using it in the way I just had learned to use it. Here's something I know about it.
Mhm.
Well, that's a brilliant idea. Let's test it. Let's make it happen. And you don't have those opportunities without growth, without new people
Mhm.
coming in. So back
Yeah.
to your point about people that are fearful, again, you gotta take the chances, right? I call it, at some point you got to be all in, right? But it starts with
Mhm.
reading and comprehending and just jump in the pool. We need everybody.
Yeah, and I think that's what separates good cyber leaders from great ones. It's knowing, liking, trusting, having that faith and belief within people, letting them be free, letting them grow, and then building the community by growing leaders, building leaders. And I think it takes that leader in order to see the potential leadership capability within others. It falls in line with capability development. And I think that as a leader, you should be focused on capability development, whether it's people, processes, systems, whatever label that you want to put on it. I think it all has a lot to do with capability development. But moving forward within like the next 3 to 5 years, what do you currently see that is an opportunity for cybersecurity within the next 3 to 5 years, or where do you see cybersecurity really heading?
Terry, I'm going to change up your question because a lot of people always like to ask that 3 to 5 years or the 5 to 10 years question. I'm going to say 3 to 5 months
Yeah.
because every
Okay.
day we get new advancements of AI, or every week there's this new, now it's Claude, and then tomorrow it'll be another one. There will always be another AI coming out that's going to disrupt, be innovative, or be better at this and this. So, with that being said, everyone on this planet should be leveraging AI in one facet or another, whether you're just simply using it as a personal assistant, whether it's your Siri or your Alexa, OK Google. If it's just on your phone, limited to that, or you're using generative AI, I've used it to write songs, make music, to help assist my writing, to be a personal assistant. There's a lot of different facets you should be using AI for. But every job, just like what job today doesn't touch technology, right? Whether you're just a
Mhm.
UPS delivery guy, you still got that tablet where you got to coordinate all the deliveries and so forth. You're touching technology in every job on the planet. At some point, you touch a computer. So, with that being
Mhm.
said, AI is the latest tool within that technology set. Whether you're on a phone, tablet, or computer or laptop, you can touch AI now. So, it behooves everyone to learn as much as they can about it. How to write better prompts to get better results, etc. There are free courses everywhere. And so, knowledge is empowering. I think a lot of folks need to start learning about that. So, the next 3 to 5 months in regards to cyber, every role is going to be impacted by AI, some more than others, but
Mhm.
it behooves you to know as much as you can about this technology to leverage it. Because if someone had to reduce a SOC team, for example, I'll use that as an example. Let's say there's 20 people on the team right now today. 3 to 5 months from now, you can find your team reduced by half or more. So when they make that
Mhm.
reduction, they're going to obviously look for who are the folks that can know how to leverage AI, that has demonstrated their training and expertise in it, because they might be the last ones cut. Again, I talked earlier about there's a
Mhm.
word I call differentiator. What makes you different from the other 100 plus people vying for that position, right? And it could come down to a training course you took that was absolutely free, but you took the initiative to take that course, put it in your profile resume, and that's the one reason why the company decided not to cut you, but they cut the other 50% of the team. Again, these are
Mhm.
realities that are facing companies today, so I'm not trying to scare people. This is real things that are happening. So to prepare for that, it's better to not be caught flat-footed. So again, if there's free training, I just said the magic word, it's free, it just costs your time. Invest into upskilling in the next 3 to 5 months. And that's the best advice I
Mhm.
could give to that.
Yeah, there's a lot nowadays that, oh, it won't happen to me. It can't happen to me. We're too well protected. We've thought of everything, whatever the case may be. And I think that there's a lot of assumptions that are out there, but do you feel that there's anything that maybe they're avoiding? I mean, I know we talked about training, we talked about upskilling, we talked about people, but there's also a lot of things happening, like, for example, letting people go, allowing AI to take over people. Do you think that there's anything anybody is avoiding because maybe they're making assumptions? I'm not sure.
Assumptions in cyber and definitely within technical fields, assumptions are the worst thing possible, right? Because you don't never want to assume
Mhm.
anything. One of the things I'd say most companies are probably getting wrong is an assumption based on checklists for compliance, for whether it's an RMF, GRC kind of compliancy that, hey, we check these boxes, we're good. And they don't understand that with AI has directly added to the average hacker, or actually Mo Gadot, I think, is the one that said he's ex Google chief that is out there on social media talking about quantum and AI. And he had a talk where he said that AI, just right now today, gives the average person around the world 20 IQ points. And that's a powerful jump. So if you're sitting at about 130, 140, you're now genius level. You're now Einstein with an AI. That's just something amazing and tremendous to think about. If it gives you 20 IQ points, and that's today, 3 to 5 months from now, that might be 30 IQ points. But with every IQ point jump, that's a tremendous amount of thinking that it's augmenting you already. So if hackers and threat actors are using AI to give them that 20 plus IQ points and how to plan attacks, how to circumvent security, that's already happening today. So that is very tremendous to think about what AI is enabling you to do and giving you that jump ahead. So to not take advantage of that for the rest of us, why aren't we? If the criminals and attackers are taking full advantage of the technology, why are we sitting around having debates about, oh, it won't replace my job. Oh, it's not the future. It's just going to be a big AI bubble burst. Well, guess what? The bubble hasn't burst yet, but the results are clear. Billboard, top 3 songs in the top 10 on the Billboard 100, AI generated. A few months ago, last summer, they had #1 on the Billboard was an AI generated artist. So now this is 4 times an AI song has cracked the top Billboard 100. That's just in content creation. You could go on any social media platform and see all these faceless channels that has these AI generated content. The war in Iran has been another showcase of deep fakes and just AI generated content that you get really hard to know what's real or what's not. So AI, even if there might be a tech bubble burst with AI, meaning the spending in it might outpace the actual reality of the usage of it, that's another decision. That's a money decision. But one thing we can't deny is that AI is not going away. It is here. It is Pandora is out the box. So I forget the original thought there. Sorry, but my main point still stands: getting educated in it, learning how to leverage it to the fullest of the capability. Because if everybody's getting that 20 IQ points, who is using that 20 IQ points better than the next person? Is sometimes what it's going to come down to.
I love that. You know, like we're getting really good at talking about cybersecurity. We're getting really good at talking about a lot of things. And I think there's a difference between like talking and taking action. But I have to ask, are we actually getting better at cybersecurity, or do you think with all the emerging technology, are we getting worse?
Terry, in the past 2 to 3 years, I've all of a sudden seen everybody on my LinkedIn profile and folks that I've known for 10 plus years or 20 years even, that all of a sudden overnight become quantum and AI experts. It's not enough to just be an AI expert, but they're both quantum and an AI expert. No other search of credentials, no published papers, no published talks. And that's meant to be a purposeful jab because anyone watching it that you fall in this category, just because you put your title, we can put whatever on our titles on our social media profiles, but it doesn't make you an expert overnight. And so that's the first bone I want to pick on that. But in regards of companies and businesses and even people, you could talk to talk. I think a lot of folks are getting really good that they know enough jargon that they could talk AI, could talk quantum, can talk at a surface level. I'm not going to throw on anyone on the bus, but I've had one guest. It wasn't this season, but it was a season ago where we started the conversation, and I quickly realized they were not an expert like their profile displayed them to be. They would reshare content from other experts. So I had made the mistake assuming that they might be able to have a deeper conversation than surface level. Within 5 minutes, I knew this person was not an expert, and I had to quickly end the recording and just apologize to them that I could not put this video out there at the rudimentary level that we could only talk to that level. Because once I asked a question beyond, they couldn't answer. And so when they finally admitted, well, I'm only prepared to really talk at this level, they couldn't talk because they were not an expert. But with that being said, I would caution a lot of people out there that are experts on LinkedIn or other job profiles, read and comprehend to the wheels fall off. Because if you ever get challenged by a real expert in the field, reputation is fleeting. Just like we know with cancel culture, it only takes one moment for you to lose your reputation as well as your credibility. Credibility is everything. When I put on my LinkedIn profile, I'm a multi-domain subject matter expert. I take that very seriously. I challenge anyone watching this right now, and I say this statement: I do 400 to 600 continuing education hours of training every year. I'm already over 400 hours, and we are only in the beginning of April of 2026. 4 months, less than 4 months, I have over 400 hours. There is no one in industry, unless you're a professor or security researcher, that is doing more reading and training than I am. And so I'll give it to those folks. They read and train all the time. But like I said, I out train almost, 80% of my peers in cybersecurity. But back to the point that a lot of people all of a sudden overnight became experts in these emerging technologies. And there are a few that really are worth their weight in salt. But my advice to business owners and stakeholders and companies that might be watching this is weigh their credentials and reputation carefully. Because just because someone says there's something, just like an interview process, you need to interview, you need to kind of get beyond the surface level to quickly see the gaps where they may not be as much of an expert as they claim to be. Sorry to go on my
Yeah,
rant there,
that
but I needed to get that off the
I
chest.
look, and I have a similar story because I remember doing season one. So I was actually the host of season one of the Top Cyber Pro podcast, and there was one episode that I did not release just simply because we was at the beginning of AI, and I had talked to somebody about AI, and all of a sudden they were an expert, and a lot of the stuff was really surface level, very repetitive, quite boring. And I was just sitting there, I was like, I cannot without a clear conscience publish this episode because, of X, Y, and Z without going into details or names or anything like that. But I actually did. I had an episode of season one that I could not with a clear conscience publish that episode. And there's a lot of opportunity that's out there, whether it's to upskill yourself, educate yourself. And I do take a lot of courses on LinkedIn and across all the platforms as well too. And I truly believe that's one of the biggest things that you can do is self-education. That is a really good high form of self-respect, is to self-educate as well, because there's definitely a lot of opportunity that's out there. But if you could give one piece of advice to every cybersecurity professional listening right now, what would that be?
I'll let Michelle start with that since she's got about 6 years in now.
Yeah.
It's hard to always narrow it down to just one. But I would say the biggest thing is tenacity and consistency. Always pushing forward. We see a lot of the quick to give up, quick to quit nowadays. And anytime that there's any resistance when it comes to something complicated or something hard or something scary, is this lack of willing to suffer through it, to find the grit to pull through it because it'll be worth it at the end. And so I would say the tenacity to keep pursuing more, keep pursuing ideas, thoughts, and chasing the betterment of yourself.
I love that. Michelle, thank you so much for sharing. Jim, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh goodness. Again, upskilling. It all comes to constantly be a
Yeah.
perpetual student, constantly learn. I think closed-minded people are the ones that are going to suffer the most in our near future, right? Because if you're set in your ways, you're not going to get really far, right? You
Yeah.
have to be willing to listen and hear other people's perspectives. You have to be sometimes patient because it could come down to personality. You could be the smartest person in the room, but if you're not an effective communicator or you're not to have certain people skills to kind of corral people to your cause or to your side, you're going to be kind of shut out or shut down in every room and every conversation you're trying to get leeway in. It's only going to lead to you being frustrated because a lot of smart people realize that they're very smart and they often go, these people are idiots. Well, guess what? Those are the idiots that you need to be the action offers to say, yes, let's go with his idea. They're the ones that are the voting members and they're in their seat for a reason, regardless if you agree with it or not. But you have to learn how to work with all kinds of people. So it requires patience. It requires a degree of empathy, but also emotional intelligence to understand what are their goals. How am I not maybe clearly, effectively communicating what I'm trying to do with this idea? Because that's why they're shutting me out, because I'm talking at too high of a level. It's going above their heads. I'm not connecting and reaching with them to show that this is going to be in line to your goals and the objectives that you want to do. Again, it all comes down to
Yeah.
communication. Again, you can have the certs, the knowledge, you can have a PhD, but if you can't communicate and can't connect with people, then yeah, you're just about as effective as a fork with the little lines across the top. You've seen a little meme about this is how I'm doing my diet. It's a fork that's got a welded top on a straight bar on the top, so you can't really use it as a fork anymore. That's about how effective you are.
I love that. So I have a question for the audience. So for the audience, you've been watching us. We've went through 5 seasons, and we've had some truly amazing guests on each and every single episode. This is a question for the audience. I want you to kind of deep dive into your knowledge, into your skills, into your experience. With the rise of AI, with a rise of emerging technologies, with layoffs, all the things that we've talked about here within this episode. I have to challenge you, as a listener of the Top Cyber Pro podcast, if you lost your job tomorrow, would your cybersecurity knowledge be enough? Would it still be valuable? Would it be able to take you into the future as these emerging technologies evolve? I want you to challenge yourself. I want you to ask yourself those essential questions. Am I doing enough? Am I learning enough? Am I networking enough? Ask yourself that, because it's very important as a professional that you maintain all of the things that professionals maintain, whether it's knowledge, whether it's skills, whether it's experience, whether it's people, whether it's playbooks, whether it's leaders' books. I used to call it a leader's book, but are you doing enough? So before we close out here today, Jim, Michelle, thank you so much for joining me here today. Do you have any final thoughts moving forward? Because I know you're about ready to go right into season 6. Is there going to be any career paths, any certifications, any tools, any resources, any particular ideas moving forward? What are you focused on for next season?
So, just to let people know, by the time this airs, I'm already halfway done with season 7. Oh no, so season 6. My apologies. Season 6. I'm already ahead of myself season wise. I'm already about 12 episodes in. So I usually shoot for 25 episodes. So I already got 12 phenomenal guests. I'm not going to name drop right now. I want it to be kind of a surprise. But just like in previous seasons, I try to have people talk. Some folks on focus on emerging tech, some on cloud security, zero trust architecture, all of the usual suspects. But one of the things I'm really excited about is some of the guests that, like I mentioned, David Stonehook from this current season, talking to kind of like being an outlier. It really inspired me to kind of look for folks that are not necessarily 100% in cyber, but they touch cyber and they're adjacent to it or parallel to it, if you will, where there's an intersection there. They have interesting discussions. And so I'll tease one of them. There's this thing called model-based systems engineering, MBSE, that's become all the rage with a lot of different organizations and so forth that are moving quickly to that. And folks, if you don't know what MBSE is, hey, put that on your reading list and on your radar to start learning about, because a lot more jobs, a lot more opportunities are going to be focused on MBSE. And with that being said, I had one of the top experts in the field that actually teaches courses at a university on this, and he's a consultant to a lot of different government agencies in regards to this. So it was a really interesting conversation, because sometimes when I interact with potential guests, they'll say, "Hey, I'm not really working in cybersecurity. I don't think I'm the right guest for you." And then when I have a short chat
Mhm.
conversation with them, they'll quickly say, "You know what? I kind of see your point. Let's do it." And we have always have an interesting conversation. And I know
Yeah.
Michelle's been privy to some of those conversations I've had. Do you have anything you wanted to add to that?
I would just say it's interesting to see how, as the field develops, how it intersects more and more with every industry, how it intersects more with not, it used to be this was tech and tech was in its box. And now you're seeing tech grow into having roots, into veins, into everything else. And so if you're not watching how it's developing, you're soon going to be eclipsed, because it's going to transform into a world that you won't recognize anymore.
Mhm. I love that. Well, Jim, Michelle, thank you so much for joining me here today. Is one more opportunity? Is there any final thoughts or any big ideas that you want to share before we wrap things up?
Always be learning, always be reading, jump in the pool and go all in. That's what I advise anyone that's really wanting to be in
Mhm.
cyber. That's kind of what it takes. That's the mentality of being all in. Now, I'm not trying to say you have to work 24/7, you don't want to burn out.
Mhm.
But when you do start to study, approach it with everything you got. Don't hold back, because you're either going to be plugged in or not plugged in. And I think that's what makes you the key differentiator amongst any team, because
Mhm.
it becomes clearly evident that what the people that are plugged into the people that are just rattling off what they had learned 5 years ago. And so I think that's the
Mhm.
key.
Yeah, I love that. Michelle, any final thoughts?
So I'm going to do a shameless plug. Check out the Top Cyber Pro podcast on YouTube. Check it out on Spotify. Share it with someone that you think it would be helpful for. And if you have any guests, you can always contact Jim at topcyberpro.com, or you can find us on LinkedIn so that we can feature someone awesome.
I love that. Jim, Michelle, thank you so much. Well, that wraps it up for this season of the Top Cyber Pro podcast. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in the next season where we will continue to bring you big ideas and thought leaders in the cybersecurity space so that you can have the knowledge, the skills, and the understanding of exactly what it takes to be a top cyber pro. We'll see you soon.